welcome to Dominican University of California. It's really a pleasure to have you here this evening and to be celebrating our 7th year as a partner to the One Book, One Marin Award. And I'm just so pleased that we could be invited to partner with the libraries of Marin County and the Friends of the Libraries and Book Passage to make this event happen. And for all the volunteers from the libraries and the university and the bookstore who are here tonight. And I really hope that you'll thank them with me for their support tonight. Thank you. Thank them very much. Our Leadership Lecture Series always includes One Book, One Marin. And without the support of Private Ocean Wealth Management and their chairman, Richard Stone, and their COO, Susan Dixon, how could we make our lecture series happen? So thank you, Richard, and your team for being supportive of our lecture series. Really, thank you. Gail Haar is the director of Marin County Libraries, and I'd like to bring her out so she can welcome our guest. Here's Gail, and I want Gail doesn't know this, but I'm going to recognize her. Gail has spent 43 years in the library business, and 2 weeks ago she retired. And we have something special for you. And 20 years with Marin County, and without her leadership, we could not do, nor would we have done, One Book, One Marin. Thank you very much, Gail.
I'll start off crying instead of finishing. So, the seeds for One Book, One Marin were planted 7 years ago when a group of representatives from Book Passage, from Dominican University, from the Marin County Free Library, and from our city libraries came together to talk about how we could use books and reading to start to build a sense of community here in Marin. And since that first program, we've read fiction, we've read nonfiction, we've read in English, we've read in Spanish, we've seen the world through the eyes of immigrants, we've seen the world through travelers both on Earth and this year in space. We've tasted foods from many lands, we've listened to music from many lands, and we've had a chance to get to meet our local authors and learn about them and their craft and their personal experiences. And I'm sure everyone here is aware of the big changes that are taking place in the world of reading these days. I mean, we have physical books, but now we have audio books and we have e-books. And in the middle of all this turmoil, the heart of what is One Book, One Marin, which is read, discuss, and build community, has just continued to thrive. And we come together with our neighbors and our friends, and we talk together, and we learn together, and we have fun together as we grow stronger communities. So it's my job tonight to thank lots of folks, and I'm going to ask you to wait until I reach the end to let loose with all your enthusiasm and your applause. The One Book partners are Book Passage and Dominican University, the Marin County Free Library, and the city libraries of Belvedere, Tiburon, Larkspur, Sausalito, Mill Valley, San Anselmo, and San Rafael. And each partner brings to the table a set of skills and expertise that contributes to the success of the program. The One Book, One Marin Committee works all year round, planning and executing the programs that you enjoy in our libraries, at Book Passage, and here at Dominican. Although you just saw her for a moment, and you won't see her name very often, Gail Peterson has kept us organized and done some fundraising for us, and she's really been the reason we've been able to grow and prosper over the last 3 years. Those of us who are intimately involved with One Book, One Marin know how important it is and how exciting and how thought-provoking our programs are, but part of our challenge is letting all of you know and letting the Marin community know what is available. And the sponsors that you see listed on the screen, and I think they're in that booklet you got, are our link to the citizens of Marin. They enable us to do all our publicity and to do our opening program at Book Passage and this event here tonight. Tonight I'd like to really give special thanks to Susan and Dennis Gallardi for their platinum sponsorship this year. And their recognition of the importance of reading and education has meant a lot to us this year. And now let's give the committee and all of the sponsors a big round of applause. So as Denise sprung on me a minute ago, this is kind of bittersweet for me tonight. I have just retired, and this is my last formal association with the program, but it's by no means going to be the last time I'm going to be sitting here and enjoying the program. And when I thought back about it, both my professional and my personal selves have been just so enriched by being involved with this program. And I want to thank the hundreds of readers, literally hundreds and hundreds of readers that we have in Marin, all of whom have given of themselves to the program and so in turn have enriched all our lives. So again, thank you all. And next I'd like to introduce Elaine. You'll introduce yourself, or would you like me to rave about you a little bit?
Oh, rave.
Rave. Elaine is just, and the book and Book Passage have just been essential to the program. She knows every author, I think, in the United States, and is able to sweet talk them into coming here and sharing with us and coming to our programs, and we couldn't do it without her.
Well, thank you. It's so much fun. I love doing it. And my colleague Karen West and Allison and Sam and Chris, all the people at Book Passage. This is one of our favorite things to do. I had so much fun the last few months. I would show up in the doctor's office and there'd be somebody reading Packing for Mars. I'd go to another cafe, someone would be reading Packing for Mars. It felt really good to know that you were so involved. And for those of you who haven't read it, yes, you are in for a treat. Since the beginning, 7 years ago, Dr. Michael Krasny has supported the One Book, One Marin event with his advice and with his time, and we are so lucky to have that. You know, Michael and his wife Leslie live in Marin County. He is a professor at San Francisco State University, but he is also a very famous host on KQED's Forum. And sometimes when I'm listening to Forum, I hear people calling in from all over the country. And I realize that although we think of it as our Bay Area station, in today's world of the web, people are understanding how important Forum is for ideas. But he wasn't always on KQED's Forum. He got his start in the radio world as the host of a KTIM program here in Marin called Beyond the Hot Tub. And you know, yeah, you can tell when that was. Michael is also an author. We have both of his books here tonight. I'm always ready to sell more books, including Off Mic, a memoir of talk, radio, literature, and life, in which he tells the secrets of what really happens in that room when the mic turns off, and Spiritual Envy, An Agnostic's Quest. These are both wonderful books, and I'm proud that we have them. Michael, some of you may, did anyone hear Michael interviewing Mary Roach yesterday? Bless Michael, he only mentioned this event 4 times, and that's, I know why you're here. But Michael has interviewed everyone, from Hillary Clinton to Francis Ford Coppola, from Isabel Allende, who he will be interviewing next Thursday morning, because she will be here at Dominican Thursday night, Barack Obama, Salman Rushdie, Archbishop Tutu. Anyone who has something important to say is going to want to be on Forum. And that's why I'm so glad that he's here tonight to interview Mary Roach, because she has very important things to tell us. Mary Roach, I wish I'd known a Mary Roach when I was a kid, because Mary Roach has taught us as adults that science is really fun, and you don't have to be afraid of science. It's really hysterical, actually. Her first book that came out in 2003 was Stiff, but before that, she had been writing articles, and I remember reading an article in the San Francisco Chronicle where she made the IRS funny. This woman can make anything funny. She has gone on to write for the New York Times, for every important magazine. And one of my favorite awards that she has received is the Harvard Secular Society Rushdie Award for Outstanding Lifetime Achievement in Cultural Humanism. I know people who are not in Marin who would not like that award, but I love it. She went on after Stiff to write Spook, Science Takes Us into the Afterlife, and it had another title in some places. It was called 6 Feet Over. She did very careful research for Bonk, The Curious Coupling of Science and Sex. If you've read that, you know how carefully she researched it. She was the editor of The Best American Science Writing. A book just came out the other day called My Planet, Finding the Human in the Oddest Places, which is a compilation of some of her great articles. And just last week, Gulp, Adventures on the Alimentary Canal came out. And how wonderful that we get to hear tonight as she talks about packing for Mars. I cannot tell you how many parts of this book are going, if you haven't read it, are going to make you laugh out loud. It is embarrassing sometimes, but you are going to love it, and we are in for a treat with Michael Krasny and Mary Roach.
I'm delighted to be here once again for the 5th year in a row, and this is a very important event for me because I know people are reading books for this event, and that encourages and I hope inspires you. In fact, how many of you have actually read Packing for Mars? Could I see a show of hands? Most of you. Mary also. Mary and I are kind of what I describe as old dancing partners. We've done a number of shows together with other books of hers. Just did one yesterday, in fact, and we talked about her new book, which I'll plug, Gulp, which will take you into the digestive system from the time you begin to put food in your mouth until it winds up in the other place. And I thought we'd begin this evening's conversation. We will take some questions from you and hope that we have time to answer any questions you may have. I thought we'd begin by finding out, I was just imagining when I was driving over here, if somebody came to you now and said, you can be an astronaut, what would you say?
Where am I going? I would, to the moon, absolutely. Mars, wrong personality type. You know, 2 years in a small space with other people that I didn't necessarily choose to be with, or even people that I chose to be with. I think I'm a terrible candidate. I think, and it's interesting how the qualifications for becoming an astronaut, the personality traits have changed since the early era when it was very short missions, one or two, just 2 crew members, and you know, you wanted to be the aggressive, macho, brave, right stuff. And then you come around to the shuttle era, the International Space Station. We have a bigger crew, and you're out there for a long time. Now they look for like sense of humor, flexibility, empathy. Ability to form stable and quality interpersonal relationships. That's actually, so yeah, you can't be cranky, irritable, inflexible.
Is that how you define yourself? Yeah. Certainly.
My husband is here somewhere. You can, he'll verify that.
Never known you to fulfill any of those cranky traits in the contact that we've had through the years. But I must say that you really give us a kind of bird's eye view, so to speak, of what it's like to go through the training. And a lot of it is pretty rough, which is part of what prompted me to ask you the question. I mean, the isolation, the boredom,
right.
And just the physical exigencies of what you go through.
Right, right. Actually, you know, and one of the things when people read Packing for Mars, sometimes they'll say, wow, I thought I wanted to be an astronaut, but that sounds really tough, and now I don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable, and the food is icky, and the toilets are difficult to use. And I hate that that's the reaction people have, because I feel that I'm someone who likes to go backpacking, and that's one of those things where you're often you're sleeping on the ground. It's uncomfortable. You're eating that awful freeze-dried food, or you're boiling up some junk, and you don't have the comforts of home. You can't make a really good cup of coffee, but who cares? Because you're in this place with this incredible view, and so few people have been to this place where you are. And I feel like it must be for astronauts like that times 100. So what that it smells like a latrine in there, and so what that you're stressed out and you didn't get enough sleep last night. You look out the window and this view of the earth is this mighty marble, and you can see the atmosphere, this little fragile layer, and just life-changing. So I haven't been in space, but I think that those little, and they're significant, the difficulties. It's obviously a stressful job, but I think all that just sort of falls away when you're up there.
With the aesthetics.
Was the aesthetics and just the realization that you're in space, that you've got this unbelievable, majestic view of things. Plus, you're floating, zero gravity, unbelievably fun. I mean, I probably, and the amazing thing is that gets old in a few days. That is incredible to me. They're like, oh yeah, ho-hum, I'm floating around like a soap bubble.
It was also very illuminating for those of us who read your book to realize just how much gravity was baffling to how little it was understood about gravity. The
earliest experiments with sending a living organism up, just very, very briefly into space. It was this period of protracted hand-wringing, like, what will happen? Can a live organism even exist in space? Will the body even function? What will happen? Will the organs work the right way? Will you be able to swallow?
The eyeballs will be rolling.
Yeah. Will the brain explode? What will happen? So it was this progression of like little tiny animals, and then eventually the chimps, which the chimpanzees were sent up. And that's partly why we lost to the Soviets, because we weren't sure. We were like, whoa, let's first send the chimp up. And the astronauts were ready to go. They were ready to get up there and be there first, but nobody quite knew, because it's such a, no gravity, no air. I mean, it's just a very foreign, frightening thought.
Well, the best astronaut, as you point out in your book, would be a deaf African American. Now, can you explain why that is?
Deaf? Did I say deaf?
Deaf, yeah.
African Americans on average more dense bones.
Right.
Because one of the things that happens
there's a lot of mass of you.
Yeah, when you're in zero gravity, you're not using your musculoskeletal system. You're just floating. So your body likes to streamline things and figures, well, we're not using this, so let's just take it apart and use the energy elsewhere. So you have a lot of muscle, you lose bone at a pretty alarming rate. After, I think it was like 6 months, you end up, it's similar to having been in a wheelchair. You're not, because you're just not using anything, so atrophy sets in. So denser the bones, the better. I don't remember what was deaf?
I thought that was what I read. I'm summoning my memory here, but it's possible. It's starting to go.
Maybe it was you mean because of space motion sickness?
Yeah.
Oh, if your vestibular, something wrong with your vestibular system. Yeah, right. And interestingly, there's someone, the woman who does the most research in space motion sickness, which is a variation of motion sickness.
It's like car sick.
Car sickness, yeah. Well, because the little bones in the ear, they're floating around, they're not settling, so they're pinging around, and your brain is trying to adapt to that, and it's can be a very difficult thing to go through for a few days before you adapt. But there's a woman at NASA Ames who studied space motion sickness, and the way that they do it, it's brutal. It's called the rotating chair. And it looks like, when it's not switched on, harmless enough, kind of an office chair, but there's a platform and you sit on it, and as you go around, you tip your head like this and you're spinning, and within 3 turns, I was nauseous. But what's amazing, her husband has a vestibular condition, so he's immune to it. So she got the chair, and he was the first one to go on, and she's like, this doesn't work. Because he's like, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. Then she got on it and, of course, realized. Yeah.
Do you go into this book with that, the old Ernest Hemingway ethos, I'm going to have the experience of this, and that's what I'm going to build on? In other words, I'm going to do it and live it as best I can, because that's exactly what you did. That was the plan from the beginning.
Yeah, I do, where I feel that it can help me explain the experience to people. I mean, I don't want to wander so far into it that I fall into the stunt journalism category. So I try to limit it. In Bonk, for example, that's where I've been criticized for, it being sort of stunty. And I'll tell you why. I mean, with physiological research on sex, arousal and orgasm, as a journalist, if you call up a lab and you say, I'm really interested in that study that you're going to do where you document genitalia in sexual union. Okay, if you say, I'd like to be there in the room, okay? They're going to say, are you out of your mind? It's hard enough to get somebody to volunteer to do this study, and you want to be there with your notepad. But what it comes around to is, well, you could volunteer as a subject. So, and I wanted to be able to explain what that is like, because one of the central curiosities that I had about the topic was, I'd read about Masters and Johnson's work, and some of the, this is in the 50s, and they had women coming in, and there's a penis camera basically with a light source, and women would, because they're documenting sexual response, and some of that's happening inside, and so they thought, what could we do? I know, we'll build a penis camera, and, and women will come in, and we'll put that camera, it's a phallus on a motor, so it's going like this, and it's got a switch so you can control the speed. And this is the 50s, and I thought,
it's all very arousing, isn't it?
And I, of course, wanted to interview some of these people, but their identities have been kept secret. The machine has been disassembled. So I had to find, the machine should be in the Smithsonian. I can't believe that the artificial coition machine has been disassembled, no longer exists. Anyway, so I thought, well, how can I explain what this is like without talking to somebody who was in that study? And I thought, well, one way to do that is to be a part of one of those.
Volunteer for service. It's sort of the same thing with a colonoscopy, wasn't it?
Well, similar, yeah. The colonoscopy. Well, I thought, okay. You don't have a lot of opportunities to see your own rectum and colon. I don't know, no. It's not, unless I guess some sort of mirror and, I don't know, you could freelance it, but I think it's probably easier to enlist the colonoscopist. And here's the other thing is that in Europe and in Asia, colonoscopies are done with sedation on demand, which is to say it's set up in an IV, and if you need it, you raise your hand and they give you a little bit. And 80% of people are like, I'm fine. So people have this fear of colonoscopy. It's not that, it's okay, it's uncomfortable.
I'm having what we call an involuntary memory now. Gave a speech not that long ago for the new head of medicine at Kaiser in San Rafael, and I happened to see my urologist there, and I welcomed him and noted and recognized him and said his hands have been where no other man's hands have gone before. And the reason I mention that, I mean, as long as we're talking about rectums here, I don't want to necessarily, but the real reason I mention that is because, you weren't affected by Star Trek or any of those things as a kid. In fact, Star Wars, those things didn't invade your consciousness at all, did they?
Star Trek, no. I mean, I watch it now just for the kitsch value.
So what got you excited about space? What was it?
That segue from urology to Star Trek, I have this sense that something dropped out there in the middle.
In space.
And it's now floating around.
It's the void, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of didn't want to...
Well, thanks for noticing my segues.
Void to void. Very well done, yeah. Okay. What was the question?
I've said she has more fun with me than Jon Stewart. I want you to know. And vice versa. So,
yeah.
What inspired you, really, is what I'm asking. What got you interested in space?
Packing for Mars?
And particularly specifically for Packing for Mars.
Yeah, Packing for Mars, that was years and years ago. There was a magazine that sent me to Johnson Space Center, and I'd never been there, and they wanted a story on how they train astronauts for spacewalks, and that's when they're outside the spacecraft, tethered, but really, out there in space, doing, whether they're fixing a solar array or attaching something, whatever it is needs doing, they're out there, and it is this unbelievably well-rehearsed, like step by movement. It's all rehearsed in this huge, it's a swimming pool as big as this room, And sunken at the bottom is a replica of a piece of the space station. And those astronauts put on their suits, and they go down and rehearse over and over and over exactly what they'll do. And it's this amazing process. And I had no idea, just everything that goes on the ground I found fascinating, more interesting in many ways than what happens in orbit, was the incredible amount of training. Because you can't just wing it up there. I mean, you can't just, I mean, you've got to you've got to be really careful, because you don't want to be the poor person who lets the spatula go. Someone's spatula got away from, became the spat-sats, the spatula that orbited Earth. If someone lost their whole tool bag at one point.
Actually, I didn't realize crumbs are really dangerous, yeah.
Yeah, with the early space food was one of the things that, it had to be, you had to be small. There's not a lot of space, so and they didn't want a lot of residue. They wanted low residue, as in, because there's no bathroom in this early spacecraft, the Gemini and the Apollo, they didn't have a bathroom that you went into, you had a bag. So the food was designed, no crumbs was one thing, but also the food was designed to be, it was highly processed, and you wouldn't have any fiber or waste material, so you never had to confront the bag if you were lucky during your whole mission. So the food was designed to constipate the astronauts.
And I mean, I know that you have this often described as unusual interest in these evacuative processes, but there is really once you're up in space, you don't really feel the need to go. I mean, to urinate, for example. Well,
the human bladder is evolved in Earth gravity, and so the way it works is the fluid, it collects on the bottom, and then it starts to build up, and then stretch receptors let you know, okay, starting to fill up now. But if you're in zero gravity, it doesn't build up on the bottom. It's sort of all around and clinging by surface tension to all around, and so by the time the stretch receptors are activated, you may be too full to go. So, and that's a horrible catheterization medical situation.
So astronauts are told to go at certain times.
So it's like kids. You kind of you just go every few hours, even though you kind of have to be potty trained in a way. Yeah. You've got to relearn how to go to the bathroom, how to eat a meal, how to cross the room. So you take the world's most high achieving, accomplished Americans, and you put them back in kindergarten for a little while. Yeah.
Does this have practical use in everyday mundane life, this kind of training?
Probably not a lot of application, but I think it probably builds your patience. I think you become a very patient person. I remember there's an astronaut, Peggy Whitson, who's a commander on the space station, and at one point I don't know if I was interviewed, I don't remember what the situation was, but I remember she was either reading a transcript or I heard her talking to some of it. So she had to take a bunch of photographs, and she did that. And then the person at Mission Control said, well, we're not finding those. We can't find those. And she said, well, I did take them. They said, well, they're not here. And she said, that's fine, I'll redo it. With it, just, calmly. I would have been like, well, look again, because I know I took them. I don't have time for this. I had 3 hours sleep last night, and this is your problem. And, but she was just, that's fine, I'll redo it. I think you have to bring some of that along from the beginning. Certain people are made for this, and other people are not like me. Yeah.
Well, but you are made for certain things, weird science writing, and also good and very productive sense of humor. In fact, let's talk about that for a few moments at least. You've described your girlhood as growing up kind of as a nerdy, gangly kid in New Hampshire, and not getting asked to the dances and all that sort of thing. So does your sense of humor come to some extent from that sort of adolescence of yours?
I don't know.
Your family?
I don't actually think of myself as I'm not funny I'm not quick-witted, I don't think. My humor, I think the humor in my books comes from gathering the material and finding the situations that are going to produce humorous potential. So just the conversation, the juxtaposition of, say, me trying to interview somebody who's figured out a way to weigh the soul of a leech using consciousness theory, which I know nothing about. So my struggling to understand this person, it's not, I'm not really saying anything funny. The humor grows out of the surrealness of the situation. So the big part of my job is to find a topic that will be rife with these potentially humorous scenarios and seek them out and experience them and do what I can with them. But I don't think of myself as a funny
No, but you are.
Funny person.
I mean, these are, isn't she funny?
Oh, but I'm not.
A funny writer. And it may be the gift of finding these idiosyncratic sorts of things that you seek out, that you have a kind of divining rod for, that allows you to make humor out of them. I mean, and it's a gift. You didn't really have one of those quick onomatopoeic titles for this book, though. It had to be Packing for Mars.
No, we tried very hard. We tried very hard. I thought that I thought a good title for Packing for Mars would be Floaters, which my editor wisely nixed. Someone suggested Void, which would have been a kind of a void. Yeah, got the little double entendre. But no, because we wanted something that suggested the human side of it. It's not a book about rocket science. It's very much the human experience of space, and there's not one word. I don't know. We couldn't. Did you have any?
I'll try to set my mind to it, but no, I don't off the top of my head. Nor can I promise you one, but did you come out of this whole experience feeling optimistic about space travel, feeling kind of really bullish about it?
I think it's right now is an incredibly exciting time because of the private space effort. You know, SpaceX and Bigelow and Dennis Tito's plan to do a Mars flyby, which he's manned flyby, not just sending it around, but with a couple. A married couple, and good luck to them. There's one divorce coming around. But that's underway. There's also Mars One, which is this wonderfully enthusiastic aerospace engineer named Bas Lansdorp or something like that. Anyway, and he's trying to do, this is a fascinating, his approach is that, well, he's thinking, well, if you were to sell the television rights globally for this as a kind of reality show, a Mars mission, one way, and not like a suicide. People say it's a suicide mission. Think of it as extreme immigration. You're going to Mars. They're going to resupply you as long as the budget lasts. So you'd be there'd be unmanned landers bringing supplies, and you'd be growing things there, and so the crew would just stay on Mars. And right now they're soliciting video applications. You send a 1-minute video explaining why you should be on the crew. That one crew will be chosen American Idol style. There will be everybody voting for one crew. The rest of them will be.
Don't tell me Simon Cowell is involved.
Simon Cowell should be on that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's underway at the same time as the Dennis Tito business, and SpaceX is now sending capsules up, docking with the ISS. So to me, there's private industry working with space agencies globally. So it's going to be this big cooperative effort rather than one country trying to be the first and take it on with one budget. It would be a combined effort. So I think it's a very exciting
Well, of course,
time.
NASA's gone leaner in their budget, and they've gone, well, shall we say, less ambitious than in the past. All this has been scaled
except
down.
I've heard that the budget for the manned space program is actually increased the first year of the Obama administration. So they're still in there.
You're enthusiastic. You're excited about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the cover of the New Yorker this week. Mars. Yeah.
And how did you feel when you saw those pictures come back initially? I mean, I think they had
the
more
Mars,
hits
the Mars photographs?
Yeah, I think they had more hits than anything in the history of the internet.
Oh, amazing. I remember the first time I looked at some of those Mars, I forget which lander it was, but I was just getting going on Packing for Mars, and I saw it was very much, well, it looks a lot like the ones they're bringing back now, because Mars, let's face it, it's not a lot of variation in the landscape, but I saw, just to be able to have this view of these little rocks and things, to see what it would be like almost from a human eye view walking around. It was amazing to me. I sent it to my agent because we had just concluded the deal on the book, and I'm like, look at this. This is unreal. I send it to my agent, and he writes back, kind of looks like the outskirts of Las Vegas. It's kind of like, yeah, some gravel.
You mentioned a married couple going up to Mars. Talk about, your marriage in light of some of these escapades. Well, I mean, particularly, putting things in the refrigerator and those sorts of things. There were some.
Well, I have a very good-natured husband,
You'd
Ed.
have to.
Yeah, and Ed, but Ed and people usually bring up the the bonk escapade, which was the ultrasound filming of us having sex. So, and that was, see, Ed made the mistake early on when he heard about the book of saying, oh, sex research, sign me up. So, and I wasn't entirely, when I heard about the ultrasound extravaganza, and I said, because the Dr. Deng, the guy who was doing this, said, well, because I said, could I come to the lab and be there when this happens? And he said, well, we're having trouble finding volunteers for intimate study, so if your organization can provide a brave couple, I'll be glad to arrange it. So, so my organization called its husband. No. And I wasn't entirely forthcoming. I believe I said, well, you know how you haven't been to England in 25 years, and we could go and I'll pay for everything. We'll go to some shows in the West End. Jeremy Irons is in something, and we'll go Stonehenge. We have to have sex in front of a guy with a white coat. And, so and Ed has a wonderful ability to engage in complete denial up until the very. I mean, he was fine with it until we're sitting out in the hall, and and we're wearing the horrible little hospital Johnnies. It's not a.
It's like a setup for a lot of jokes, I think.
And the Dr. Deng is coming down the hall, and that's when it hit Ed. And he's just, oh God, here he comes. Like just, because of course the burden of performance was on him.
Yeah.
I was taking notes.
Was that part of foreplay, or?
Yeah, with journalists, that's kind of how it works. Yeah.
So he's been very good-natured through all these.
He's an incredibly generous and good-natured person. Yeah.
And yet you describe yourself as cranky and cantankerous. You don't really come across that way at all.
He's here somewhere. You talk to him afterwards.
And now you've got this book, Gulp, which actually came almost organically out of Packing for Mars, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. The chapter, the zero gravity toilet chapter, was just so engaging in ways that you wouldn't imagine. The waste management engineers at NASA they have an unbelievably tough job, and the missions, the morale for the mission is really tied into the work of the waste management people, because when that thing doesn't work, and the toilet doesn't work, the contingency is the old fecal bag from the Apollo era, and that's a sad thing. You don't ever want to deal with that. But in order to test, I mean, if you make a space toilet, you've got to actually test it in zero gravity. You've got to put it on one of those flights that goes like this, haul the toilet over to Ellington Field, put it on there, and get somebody to, in the 22 seconds of zero gravity that you have. That's quite a burden. And I talked to a guy who was on one of those flights. Charles Borland was the food engineer. He was testing a bunch of packaging to make sure the stuff would come out, that the things would stick to the spoon and surface tension was right, blah, blah, blah. He had a bunch of things to test, and he said, yeah, I could see the toilet people, and they had a curtain pulled. But when we'd start to go over and down, and you could see things start to come up, and their feet would come off the ground, and you'd hear them go, 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 go. And for that reason, and the guy failed in 22 seconds to do his duty. And so then it became that someone's task at NASA Ames to build, to engineer a high-fidelity human fecal simulant so that they could test the toilet in 22 seconds. So the layer upon layer of creativity and work and effort that went into something as simple as taking a crap was, I found fascinating. I mean, I know everybody thinks, oh, you know, that I'm just, like I've got a 12-year-old boy sense of humor and interest, which is true. But also, I just the intricacies and the challenges of something so simple. To me, it was a wonderful way to explain why space is expensive, why it's interesting, all the stuff that goes into it that no one really thinks about. I mean, particularly in the Apollo era, where it was just sort of the heroics and the, you know, the photo opportunities, and not the kind of nitty-gritty stuff that went on down here and also up there. I mean, you look at the transcripts from, there's transcripts of all the ground to space communication, and there was a lot of, I mean, you look up, you can do a keyword search on turd, or like, I mean, there was just a lot of, it was a dirty, messy job, being an astronaut. They were, and the moon dust, they were coated in this, it would cling, it was this sooty, like they just, all that ground into their clothes. One of the Apollo, I forget which one of the Apollo missions, they were so filthy they just stripped down naked and came home completely naked, which of course Walter Cronkite was not reporting, but
this is
anyway.
your scatological interest, but actually you're driven by your curiosity. I mean, all these books have to do with sort of seeking answers and having this inquiring mind and wanting to be fulfilling of your curiosity and where it takes you.
Yeah, no, curiosity is it's the greatest gift someone can have. I think sometimes, I think, you know, for someone to say, oh, you know, you have the sensibility of a 12-year-old boy or something, to me that's a bit of a compliment, because when you're that age, you still have a sense of wonder and curiosity, and you're not really afraid to ask questions, and you have this, you're taking it all in and saying, why? How?
That's why your books are read by those of all ages, which prompts me to ask you, I mean, they're even used in science education, they're used one book, one Marin in the schools and so forth.
Right.
I ask you to kind of weigh in on science education and how you think it can be improved, or what sort of curriculum might be particularly good in terms of getting the curiosity of these young people whetted and excited.
Yeah, my books, well, Stiff, oddly to me, Stiff is the one that is used the most in a lot of high school curricula, and
mortuary science.
Mortuary science, anatomy, medical ethics. I mean, it's kind of, it pops up all over the place. And I think, I mean, obviously, I mean, my books are not, they're not comprehensive. They're certainly not, they're not textbooks, but I think it's worthwhile to incorporate, and I'm not just trying to boost my own sales, but just to incorporate something that is fun, that's something that makes science a fun read. Kind of, I like to think of myself sort of a gateway drug to science. See, you've got to make someone realize it's not just the drudgery of difficult homework assignments. That it is, science is the world around you. It's your liver, your dog, your computer, the trees, the weather, space. So how can you not really be interested in that? It's understanding how things work and how the things around you work, and so, you know, tapping into that natural curiosity, I think, is important. And then you pile on the drudgery and the difficult homework assignment. I mean, you know, you've got to, if you're going to go into science, you've got to really learn the hard stuff. But first, you've got to make people see that it's fun and it's fascinating. It's the world.
I told you, I think, that I went to the new Exploratorium and just realized it's built for that purpose. This is, I guess, a recommendation for those of you who have not. It just opened recently. We did a program on it.
Right.
And it's fascinating, and, you know, kids get their eyes wide, but so do adults.
Yeah.
And they do with your books too.
Yeah.
What are some of the more peculiar and maybe offbeat and outlier responses you've had to your books?
Outlier responses.
Or unexpected.
Unexpected. I sometimes get, it's unusual. Usually it's the kind of thing that's said behind your back, but you know, sometimes you hear people saying that because they're accessible for people, they're easy to read and they're fun, that the science suffers because you're not going into all the detail and explaining at a level that is...
You're too much for the lay audience or something like that?
Yeah, that it does a discourtesy to the science or something, that sort of thing. Occasionally I get that.
But that wasn't unexpected, really. Because scientists can be snobbish about their specialties and so forth.
No, but that not a lot of outlier responses to. Oh, I got a note when Stiff came out. I got a note from Dr. Kevorkian's assistant. And it started out, it was very, very lovely, and I really enjoyed your book. However, when you wrote, because Dr. Kevorkian, before he did the euthanasia business, before he really became Dr. Death, well, he was a little dark even earlier on. He had done some work with transfusing cadaver blood. When someone dies, there's a window of time where the blood can be taken and used in what's the word I want? Not transplanted. Transfusion, yeah, right. Anyway, so but what was curious about this particular paper that Kevorkian had written is that he said, it's not really necessary to inform either the recipient or the donor's family because they'll think it's weird and say no. And I mentioned that, and he said, well, I did say that, but I need to tell you we did get permission for that. So, and he said, and I'm going to send your book to Dr. Kevorkian in the Thumb Correctional Facility. I thought, all right, he probably needs reading material. So I kept waiting for Dr. Kevorkian's. I never got a note back from. So that was an interesting. I wasn't really expecting that one.
Did you? Just want to ask you one final question because we have some questions coming from the audience. All Stories, I think it was Hemingway, I didn't know I'd be mentioning him twice tonight, believe me, who said all stories end in death. And since you mentioned Stiff, did you feel any differently about anything that would happen after death in writing that book?
Well, Stiff, here's when I had never spent much time with cadavers, and which I guess isn't that surprising. But there is something when you walk into a room or a field or whatever it is, and there's a dead person there. There's an immediate. You just know. You don't need to get close to them and see if they're hold a mirror up. You look and you like that's a hull of a person that somebody's left. There's this immediate sense of somebody's gone, which makes you think, where'd they go? It didn't really change. I don't know where they went. I didn't know, and I don't know. But it just brings the question up in this visceral way, just like that is a shell, that is not a person, and so that was interesting, just that reaction. And
with respect to space, you must have had a similar kind of maybe epiphany or realization, illumination. I mean, just the vastness of space and what a void it is. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and reading some of the astronauts' descriptions of just incredibly moving. Their words, just looking down on the planet, and because you don't see the borders, you just see the planet, and it's this home of all humanity, and the preciousness of the atmosphere, and how I think, I mean, I haven't been in space, so I haven't experienced that personally, but just reading those words, there's a profundity that comes through that I think it just changes people, and even indirectly, second generation reading about it and talking to people, it's very human.
Human and other waste simply be ejected into space.
Oh, why can't the waste be ejected into space?
Littering, for one thing.
Yeah, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
There's some, I don't know, it's not like the space treaty, but that's they used to do the urine would be sent out into space, and it would sublimate, or it would do this, and apparently it was at least 2 astronauts' memoirs cited that as the most beautiful thing they saw in space. This beautiful kind of cascade, almost like a starbursting, beautiful. It was the urine like flash freezing and sublimating,
I think this
with the
is-
light shining
It's
through
in
it.
Krafft-Ebing, you know. I mean, it's in Sexual Perversion, actually. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but
But,
so
I mean, they all seem to agree there's something really gorgeous about this, yeah?
yeah, yes, the spectacle of the droplets dispersing and sublimating in the sun was apparently a beautiful sight. Yeah.
In researching weightlessness via parabolic trajectories, did you have a chance to talk to the makers of the film Apollo 13, who I understand used the method to film all the weightless scenes?
They did film Apollo 13 on the Vomit Comet, and I didn't speak to the people who made it, but I did speak to people at Johnson Space Center who said that in order to get permission, they had to have a special proclamation passed. I mean, because you're not allowed to use the government plane for commercial enterprises. But Tom Hanks got involved, and somebody's heart melted, and so they bent the rules a little bit, and they were able to. But there was a lot of bureaucracy to get permission to do that. Yeah.
Speaking about films of astronauts, our own, that is, Bay Area filmmaker Phil Kaufman made a film called The Right Stuff, and I mean, it's a remarkable film in many ways, but also the whole idea, which came from Tom Wolfe's book, was that astronauts have a certain kind of character, they have a certain kind of resilience and perseverance and really strength, inner and outer, that is in many ways inimitable. You agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even now, even when the qualifications have shifted a bit to being able to get along in a group, I still think that you need an extraordinary character to be able to, first of all, just to make it through all of the requirements, and you have to have a tremendous amount of motivation and drive and passion. So yeah, they're still. I mean, I've never met an astronaut where I think that's just kind of a drip. I mean, they're really cool people. They're just incredibly generous with their time and patient, and because they're asked to do a lot of publicity. They're kind of the public face of the space program. They have to be careful what they say. They have to be always gracious. It's really a hard job. I mean, like a tiny fraction of your time is spent in space. You spend 6 years as an astronaut, and maybe 8 days in space. So what you do, you're doing on the ground with the public, with a bureaucracy. It's a tough job. It's a tough job, setting aside the space part. Yeah.
A question about how long it takes you to research and write a book.
A couple weeks. No, it takes me a long time, between 2 and 3 years, usually. A lot of time spent finding the right places to go and people to talk to. I want to have different narrative for each chapter if I can, with a setting, and not just the facts, but I want to put them in kind of a narrative framework to hang them off of that. So it takes a while to set up. It's a lot of time sending out emails, pestering people, pestering them again, not hearing back, that kind of thing. It takes a while.
People are always interested in writers' writing habits. You write every day?
No.
You binge write, or do you?
In the beginning of the process, there's a lot more research. As soon as I have enough material for a chapter, I will write it. I don't wait till I have. Susan Orlean, one of my favorite authors, spent 6 years doing research before she'd written a word for Rin Tin Tin. She felt like she didn't know the story until she had all the research done. She didn't know where she was going with it, so she had this huge pile of research and no pages written, which is incredibly stressful.
I can't tell you how many writers have told me they enjoy the research much more than the writing, and they would like to just have the research continue on and on.
Really?
Yeah.
I like it, but I like them both, but I only like the writing if the research went well. If the research goes well, you know it's going to be fun to write. Yeah. So the one depends on the other.
Where do you get your ideas? Your writing covers vast metaphorical and literal scientific realms. How do you decide where to go next?
Yeah. I often it's I have 2 or 3 things that have been lingering in my back pocket, and I've wanted to find ways to use them, and I'll think, what would be an umbrella topic that would enable me to have fun with this, this, and this. So sometimes the particulars come before the topic.
This is a question actually is directed to me, but I'm going to take the liberty of transferring it to you, because I'm the interlocutor, but it's nice. Mr. Krasny is a fellow Badger, University of Wisconsin. I'd like you to describe how your Midwestern background contributed to your considerable interview talents. Thank you, that's very nice. But I'm going to turn it over to you. What did growing up in New Hampshire have to do with your considerable authorial talents?
I don't think it was New Hampshire so much. I think it was my dad he was born in England. He was 65 when I was born, and he was kind of an eccentric, unusual guy with a love for travel and unconventional things. And I think it was
Englishman, how odd.
Yeah, I know. You're kind of redundant, right? So I think it was more him than New Hampshire. But the other thing about New Hampshire, I grew up. My father taught at Dartmouth, but he was an assistant professor. We couldn't afford to live in Hanover. We lived in Etna, which was kind of a wonderful little redneck town. And my neighbors were, they had snowmobiles. They'd cut the heads off chickens, BB guns, jeeps. I spent all of my time next door at the Balch's house. So I lived in this weird. Here the professor's daughter by evening, and by day, just kind of scrappy kid running around and, with barefoot at the Balch's house. So I guess I'm very comfortable, sort of, in those different worlds, and I love stepping into completely different cultures and environments, whether it's scientists' labs or some in a foreign country.
But you also have developed considerable interviewing skills too. I mean, you go in and interview people from so many different backgrounds scientifically, and some of these people who are delighted to see you because they do this arcane research, and suddenly they're being interviewed for the first time in their lives, really. Talk about how you interview people.
I don't so much interview people. Do you know what I do? I show up and I treat them like unpaid tutors, because I don't have a background, and I need 10 minutes with somebody who knows this stuff is the equivalent of 3 days trying to read journal articles or other books. Just to sit down with somebody who can explain it to you is incredibly valuable. So I do a fair amount of just I don't write out questions. If you were to film or record this interview, it would be unplayable. It would be, I could never do what you do. I have no idea how you do what you do. To be able to interview and have 3 or 4 people, in the same room with differing views, and that is, I can't even fathom how you do that. I am just really, okay, so cosmic radiation, what is it? Can you dial it down a little bit? No. So what does that mean? And so that's me interviewing. Chaos.
Time for one more question, I think. I believe the Russian missions all landed on the ground. Why, and didn't that create a lot of back injuries?
Why didn't they splash down versus, I don't know why, but even a water landing is like a low-speed car crash. I mean, it is, and if things go just the slightest bit wrong, or if it lands off nominal, as they say, not the way it's supposed to, you can break bones. Injuries were very common, and I don't know. I don't know the answer to why they chose to do it on land versus sea. So.
But you do have so many answers and so many questions, and your work is delightful to read, and it is always educational, and it's been great having her on stage, hasn't it?